Hi, how are you today, Julia? It's nice to see you again.
Hi, doing good. Yeah, good to see you again. So exciting to see what kind of questions we can answer today for the course.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining in. Even I know you're traveling in Miami right now, and so thank you for being super flexible with your schedule.
Of course.
Yeah, so for people who might be listening in the future or who has not gone to your course, don't really know who exactly you are, do you want to give them a intro about yourself and your background of what you offer and what you do?
Okay, for sure. So my name is Julia Masalska. I am a branding designer and I also do packaging. I also work very closely with Adobe on several educational projects. And I'm just very passionate about education. That's what I do on my Instagram as well and on my YouTube channel. And I was lucky enough to be one of the course content creators for the Moodle design and motion and branding courses. So my course is all about creating a social media brand identity from scratch. And so during those, I think total 1.5 hours of my part, of course, it's a course bundle, so you'll get a bunch of different other courses in this bundle. But if in my part, I'm covering how to find the right typefaces, how to find the right colors for your personal brand or your product brand, whatever it is, how to create a logo, how to create yourself reusable and scalable social media templates that you can reuse. And I can tell you, templates are making it so easy to create content. So I think every single brand should have their own social media templates. And this is something that I'm teaching in this course. So even if you're a beginner who is not a designer, or if you were working in any design software but are not branding related, this course is for you to really learn branding from scratch. And we're starting with a mood board. So we're setting the mood for your brand and then we're kind of going step by step. It's a really hands-on course so that you can really actually follow along with the starter files that I'm providing. So we will be working in Illustrator and also in Adobe XD. And yeah, it's very hands-on, very step by step, very easy to follow. So yeah.
I love that. I love that you just like give the whole courses a summary like that on the spot. But I obviously gone through your course, and I think the only module I haven't finished is the last one. So I can say it's very easy to follow, even if you don't have tons of experiences on graphic design, you can still follow through. Uh, as long as you have the Adobe Creative suite, so or a little bit basic knowledge of what are the tools are, where to find things, you can follow through. So I have a question. This is my question for fonts. I know there are different type of fonts you needed to have your branding fonts package complete. There are headers, subheaders, bodies, and accent fonts, which is optional, you said. And they all needed to be beautiful, but also functional, practical. So have you ever like really liked a body font? It just looks so nice, aesthetically gives that dynamic between different fonts in a layout, but you found it's not necessarily super practical for people to read. It's a harder to read. Then how do you compromise between like the aesthetics and the functionality between those two?
Yeah, of course. So I think for the body font, functionality definitely comes first. And then there's still some characteristics that you can have in your body font. So we have the sans serif font and that are a little bit more simple, more minimalistic, and the serif fonts that look a little bit more elegant and they have those little hooks at the top and at the bottom, and they look a little bit more elegant and give a more refined vibe. So it depends on your brand, but I would say those are the two general directions you can kind of choose from. And from there, I would pick a very classic font. So in sans serif is probably something like a like an Avenir maybe, or maybe a Helvetica if you want to be modern. So Yeah, so I would definitely pick something either serif or sans serif, and then I would pick one of the very classic fonts. And with a body font, you can still give the brand a lot of character. But I think the body font is more importantly functional. Whereas if we have the header and the subheader, those two definitely can have a lot of characters, especially the header, since it's the largest scaled typeface that we're using in a brand identity. And it's being used on the largest scale. So that's a font where you can really express the brand identity, and also the subheader can be it's basically its partner kind of supporting it or giving it a lot of contrast. So we can pick two fonts that are completely opposites from each other, and they will still work really well together, header and subheader. But the body is more of, it's a more of um like the more mature and more settled. If I would think of fonts as people, it would be like I'm a more mature, more settled person, not too flippy, not too crazy. It's more of like, hey, I am doing my job.
Yes,
you know
I love
whereas whereas the header could be like, hey, look at me, I'm the
that.
header, and I'm having so much character, and I'm crazy. And so that's kind of the difference there. And so I think that the body should be very, very toned down and very easy to read, so that the brand identity can be functional and can work over a long period of time.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with that. I think for my branding, my body copy is really minimal and it's very light. So I have some issues sometimes if the copy tests the size is too small, it's very harder to read if it, and also I have such a colorful brand, and a lot of time the background is like another brighter color, so it's harder to read sometimes. I realize that, but I try to like on the blog when there's tons of paragraph text, so I try to like bump up the size of the body copy because my
Hmm.
font is really thin, so that way to kind of kind of balance out the functionality of the body without sacrificing the aesthetic. So I guess I found
Hmm.
it's like always a balance between those two. I definitely think visuals is super important, but to a point, if you can't read the paragraph, and then there's no point to even have a
Hmm.
blog. So definitely bump
Yeah,
up the size of my blog tests over the course.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I could share something with you right now that can show a little bit more of a complex version of how I design for my clients, if you'll be interested. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna share my screen real quick, and then I wanna share that little example with you. So this is a branding that I'm currently working on. And as you can see, we have the typography being very versatile. So we have the title 1, title 2, title 3. Title 3 is the subheader basically. And now we have the body copy having 4 different variations. We have the large, the regular, the small, and the mini. So a brand identity can be very versatile, and it can, in your case, maybe you even want to add another font to your brand identity that will work better for you, right? So there are different scenarios, and every brand requires its own kind of necessary assets. And if you're working a lot with body copy, then you will probably need something very functional. But if you don't, if your brand is more like a social media based brand where you don't even have that much text, it's more of making quotes and making things look pretty, you'll definitely need a font that's very expressive. And so it always depends on the brand itself and kind of what the brand wants to achieve, right? So
Have
yeah,
you
it
ever
always depends.
Yeah, have you ever had a clients in the past? Because I feel like for my case, we started with something small and then realized, oh, we want to add a blog. And then realized, oh, we need to do newsletter. And then realizing we needed to do courses. So I think when we started our branding packages, maybe my agency think we're just only going to do certain type of things. And now it's expanding, like you mentioned that now I need a lot of texts I need blogs, I need, things. Is it often clients come back to you, be like, hey, we're now doing this, so we need like a spin off on our funds now. We need like more variety of things. Is that something you see very often?
So in my case, I'm usually creating brands from scratch. I'm rarely rebranding. So my clients all start their businesses from scratch and new. Um, right now, I'm actually working on a rebranding project, but still everything's kind of very from scratch. I'm not using any of the past assets that were there. So it all depends, but if there is already a brand in place, but it needs a little bit more variety or a little bit more flexibility, um, I think what's important is to understand the need and understand the client and understand the character of the brand, and then you'll be able to expand it maybe with additional typography or additional color palettes. Sometimes it happens when clients come to me and let's say they are coming up with new products, but their color palette is very limited. So what I can do as a branding designer is I can help them expand the color palette and create additional colors that they can use to differentiate the different products, right? So, and the same thing can happen also with typography, that typefaces can be added on to the brand. Of course, they have to match the previous identity if it's not a rebrand.
Yeah, well, I guess what I'm asking is, do you ever had clients grow, you've designed it in the past and their brand has been growing, so they're doing different more things than when you initially started the designer brandings, and then they needed more things, they come back to you, ask, hey, can we have something additional?
Yeah.
Is that like something?
It hasn't happened just because I am very attentive and I want the brand to live without me for a long time. I don't want to make the client dependent on me, right? What I want to do is I want to provide assets so they can live on for a long time and create all the different things they need to create. So when I'm designing for a brand, I'm looking at UI UX, I'm looking at their print, I'm looking at, and for all of these things, I'm making sure that I have a good typography that will work in all of these elements. And also the color palette, of course, a logo that's flexible, that has a vertical version, that has a horizontal version, and maybe like a letter form to it. So it's all about creating a flexible brand identity and having the brand live on for a long time without me. That's kind of my goal, that I don't see those clients coming back and asking for more, because they already have so much that they can still create and recreate from all of these assets.
Totally. I think that's a way to go, and it's not it's very ethical of a designer to be like, hey, I just want to give everything you need so you don't come back to me next year.
Yeah. Once I'm kind of empowering and making design more accessible to my clients. I'm also looking at how, if sometimes I have businesses where the business owner is also the one creating the content and also designing themselves. So I'm trying to see what software do they use? How can I make it as easy as possible for them to create something themselves, right? So I'm trying to empower them and help them kind of do some of the things themselves as well.
Yeah, I like that approach a lot. I know you just mentioned that you're trying to have a very longevity type of a design that can have a really long lifespan. But in your experiences, if the company is more than like 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, do you think a rebrand is necessary? And if so, what are the indicators? Then when you land on somebody's property and on the internet, you'd be like, oh, they're a great brand, but I think they need a refreshing their looks. So what are those indicators?
So I think the indicator is one of the indicators is when the brand is not targeting their actual audience anymore. When, let's say, they had a change of products when they had a change of target audience. And so let's say they started off with something very crazy colorful, and now they want to go more into like a more elegant type of branding, and want to, let's say, address a more luxurious type of client, and they definitely will need a rebrand because their target audience changes. So their brand needs to be able to communicate that brand to the customer in the right way, right? So that's one of the indicators. Then I think design can sometimes live with time. Like if we look at, for example, companies like Nike, they had so many sub rebrands or so many campaigns that had their own branding, where you're like, wow, this is still Nike, but it's
Yeah.
also so different, and it's suddenly so vibrant versus very minimalistic.
Right.
And so I think a brand identity, um, so one thing that stayed with Nike is that they are showing the power of a person, the power of humans, right? They're showing people in action. That's something that stays, and that brand messaging, the original tone of voice, is so important in a brand identity. So before even making the decision of are we, having the right visuals, thinking about what's the message between a brand, right? And is the visual identity really supporting that message? So yeah, it's a challenge to have a very long living, flexible brand identity.
That's very important. And I think you're absolutely right on the Nike's brand. They are a big brand, so it's necessary. They have so many different categories and different type of products. So it's necessary they have a very, very large, not large, very like a lot of a variety in terms of their subcategories or different products. They probably they target from probably the infant all the way up to like 80 years old. So that's a very
Exactly.
different group of a target.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah,
And there it's all about the brand message. So the main message behind the brand, and it goes all across their branding. So, that strength of a human and a person in action.
yeah.
That's kind of, that's what they want to show across all the different products that they offer. But yeah, that's I think Nike's doing an amazing job, and I think that's like super inspiring to see brands like that, how they are actually, solving that problem.
I know you're more of a visual branding designer, but in terms, you just mentioned Nike's message. So for me, I think brand needs a message first and positioning themselves first in order to came up with visual accordingly later. So do you only work with clients they already have that type of a message and the positioning of their own brands and come to me saying, oh, these are like our things, and or do you have to explore that with your client together?
Yeah, so I'm actually a very strategic branding designer, and I like to do my research. So before I even start working, I start with a competitor analysis. I present all the results to my clients. So it does not start with a visual identity first. We are going through the brand message, we're going through tone of voice. How do we want to actually communicate the brand? And then I'm going into the visual identity, kind of translating the things that we put together in tone of voice and of the brand identity, and like the tagline. It's also a lot of copy. I'm also sometimes working with copywriters within the brand to be able to put that all together. And also there is a lot of data that comes with it that I also take a look at to be able to identify the target audience, the demographic, the psychographics, which has become so much more important. So which brands are the people actually surrounded with that we're targeting? Just looking at their everyday life. What are their daily challenges? What are their expectations? And like just looking at the psychographics rather than looking at age and where the person is from, but more so really deeply understanding the user of the product. That really, really helps me making very clear branding strategic decisions in terms
Yeah,
of visuals as well.
Yeah.
because everything that I'm designing has a reason. So the color palette that I'm choosing has a reason, and the typography as well, and as well as the logo and the imagery, the mood board, all of that has to do with the target audience, the end user.
Yeah, I actually, that's something I just learned. I didn't know you also do all the strategies first. I know you work with copies because when I interviewed you for the blog and you mentioned a couple of tools for copies you're using, which is really helpful. So I know you do a little bit that, but I don't know you do the whole branding experiences as well. That's really good to know. And I love your approach that all you need to like figure out all these things, your competitors, tone of voice, messagings first, and then from there, then you go off from the actual visual branding design. Um, so Helen has a question for you. She said, I love your bold and unique work. And how do you approach a client who just want to play it safe, who doesn't want to come out of their comfort zone? And how do you, what any method do you use to educate them to kind of nudge them out of their shell?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. And that's why I'm actually having the strategic backup. So it's not actually me making the decisions, but I'm trying to have the end consumer make a decision. So I'm trying to advocate for them, basically. And that's also a really helpful tool for me to justify the design decisions that I'm making and explain them to the client, because I'm not designing for myself. I'm not designing for my own, let's say, taste and what I like. It's all about that the product in the end really targets the user that they want to target. So the strategic part really helps getting a yes from the client, just because you have all the reasoning for behind what you're saying, right? So or behind your design decisions. So I think the strategic part definitely plays a big role, and all the background thoughts that you had during the design process, the strategy behind it really helps you articulate those and bring a reasonable kind of justification for your design decisions. So yeah, it's definitely a good way to approach it. And in that way, it's not like you versus the client. It's more of you advocating for the end user
Yeah.
versus the client who wants to advocate for the end user as well. So you're kind of become partners rather than fighting about what's right and what's wrong. You kind of are going the same path suddenly, rather than having different tastes or different opinions, which opinions are not something relevant during the design process. The reasons for the design decisions, that's what's really important, right?
Yeah, I love that you kind of went back to that's another reason why it's so important to go through all these foundational part before you even get into any visual designs. And then so later on, your client cannot come back at you, be like, hey, that pink is too pink, or I need more colors.
Yeah.
It's all of your design decisions backed up because you
Yeah.
poured it together early on in the whole process. So I love
Exactly.
that.
It's not just an advantage for the client that I'm doing all the research and I'm trying to help them stand out, but also it's an advantage for me because I can make those design decisions with a backup. So something is backing me up, right? So it's not just me, oh yeah, I thought, the color will be nice. It suddenly sounds very rational, and
Yeah.
you selecting specific typography or specific colors then sounds like you're an actual scientist and you understand the psychology behind how to attract the right client. So it's an interesting advantage that you have also as a designer.
Yeah, I love that. So next question is, what are the things you need to pay more attention to? I know because these days the marketing is all about on social media. So when you design a branding, you have to pay attention to the social media channels the brand is going to use. So what are like the things you need to pay attention to when it comes to design a brand within the social media usage in mind. I know that's exactly what you're teaching in this course, but yeah, do you want to share like a couple of things that how do you design a new branding with the social media usage in mind?
Of course. Yeah. So again, I think it's really important to think about the different platforms, as you say, and imagine the brand living in it and really being part of it. And how can you make it practical for the person who is going to be creating the social media content, right? So how can you make something reusable? And that's why, again, I say templates are really, really helpful. I look at templates, I make sure that the design is reusable over and over and repurposable. And then I also look at the logo a lot. Logo and typography are really important when it comes to social media, because you want to make sure that the character styles that you pick are well legible, functional, but also bring the feeling and the character of the brand. So they transmit that feeling, that mood of the brand. And then, of course, the colors are very, very relevant. These days we're living in a world where we have so many amazing visuals surrounding us, and while we're scrolling through Instagram, or for example, or any social media, we see so many stimulating visuals. Now, for us, it's important to figure out how can we stand out in this world that's already so busy with different visuals. How can we make ourselves noticeable? And so that's how I kind of think, and I think of the brand in terms of how it lives in that platform. And of course, when I work with clients who are working mostly on social media, I try to look at the different platforms that they actually use. So are they using Twitter, and how can their brand live in Twitter, which is more text-based? Or how can their brand live on TikTok, or how can their brand live on YouTube? So it all depends on the platform. And I always create mock-ups for my clients just to help them imagine how that will look like with a logo, with the typography, and any images that we're kind of using for the brand. So yeah.
That's great. Now let's talk about the colors. You know, we love colors, and the color is a huge identity of who Moodle is, and you love colors too in your work and your personal branding. There's tons of beautiful colors, and I love that you kind of introduced several, I think like 4 or 5 different ways to how to get a nice color palette, which is like amazing because there's just so many options these days. You can get the same result. So I love that. And I think one of the tools you use is called a Cooler, and that's the one platform you use to generating nice colors, color combinations, color palettes. And you also used Adobe Colors and Adobe Captures. Those are really useful things too. And you mentioned that for brands that they may have like the primary color palette and the secondary color palette, and good color palette, well versed is between 6 to 8 different colors, and there needs some contrast between the color palette, needs lighter, darker, and some mid-tones. So when a client come to you, say, hey, I love, these are my like inspirations, and that they have like already have like a couple of colors specific in mind. I know you work through the whole process before you actually designing the visual identity for a client, but if the client comes to you be like, hey, I'm really resonating with this lilac or with this yellow or whatever, and then when you actually analyzed the target market, and then realize, oh, maybe it's a little bit off from what the clients was originally thinking. Do clients normally understand because you've gone through the whole process of analyzing the market, or do they still insist on using same color? If they do you come up with like more compromising color decisions? Because I know you do like toning down some colors if it's too bright and you mute it, or if they needed a brighter color and you brighten the colors. So do you always just come with like a common ground in the end with the decision of the color?
Yeah, for sure. So it happens sometimes that the client comes with colors that are very common in that market, and so I ask them, do you want to stand out? Do you want to be different than everybody else, or do you want to be just like everybody else? And it always depends. Like for example, in the medical field, everything is a little bit more toned down, and there's a lot of use of the color blue, for example, and so more and more of the colder tones. And also if it comes to financial institutions, there's also a lot of color blue, a lot of color red. And so I help them find a suitable solution to stand out, but also I want to compromise and I want to see how we can include their suggestions into the branding, and how can we still target that exact audience with those colors, maybe adding some more colors that that will help them stand out. So I do try to include their thinking and their ideas throughout the process, because in the end, my clients are usually, they're the ones dealing with with their clients, so they know them the best. And if they say, hey, I know this color is exactly what describes my target audience, I definitely take their inputs, and we are trying to find a suitable solution that kind of takes both their input and also makes them stand out.
Yeah, I love that. I think it is important to working with client to take their thoughts account instead of just, hey, like I'm gonna, because this is what I studied and I'm gonna do things my way. So I think it's always important to listen
Yeah,
to clients' thoughts.
yeah,
Um,
I do think that my job is to advise them and to be their partner in the decision making, right? So I do want to take their input for sure, but I also want to advise them and help them with my knowledge.
yeah, totally, because you're the expert. You've been doing this for years and you know the industry the best. So you're there guiding through their journey, but they have to be agree with whatever decision you guys make it together. So let's talk about a little bit about like the future of design, because I think we had a really fun conversation on IG Live before. We kind of like talked about like the future of the graphic design or just design in general. And with AI and automation coming, obviously, I think design is gonna be the one of the only few things is not going to be fully automated in the future in the like the next decade or two. But with that in mind, but there are part of design could be automated in the future. So what do you think for like our generation or our next generation, who people are striving to be a great designers, good designers? What are like the specific tools or trends or things to watch out for the future in order for them to be a really well-versed designer? They know how to automate part of the design process, but they still have like a really good vision, strategic thinking like a designer. I know it's like a very big questions, but I just think it's fascinating to me to learn, what is the future or to predict or kind of prepare ourselves and like the generation after us for design.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think it definitely, design always evolves. So design never stays in one place, especially when it comes to technology. And so now I feel like we are making this move from static images into motion, which is the reason why this course is so amazing, kind of to keep up with the technology and to keep up with the with the evolving kind of ways to express yourself. And we are going, I think, into like augmented reality and a virtual reality. And I mean, you can buy a virtual house now online. So I mean, everything's possible. And I think as a designer, we can only be replaced if we are doing a job that's automatable. And being able to evolve with technology and being able to learn ourselves something that differentiates us from and also our emotion. That's what differentiates us from any machine, right? So if we as designers always stay curious and always stay actively learning new things, we will be able to kind of work ourselves around being automated, because I mean, technology is evolving so fast, and I am quite sure that anything that was a repetitive workflow, let's say retouching images, we have so many amazing filters now that we can just the AI can apply them, or things like even logo design. We have so many resources where we have a machine AI designing things for us. So online there are a lot of sites where you can like logo builders and stuff like that. So all of that can be done, but what cannot be done is the thinking part, the feeling and the emotion behind something. I don't think a machine will be able to transfer the emotion in such a well or a good way as a person who strongly feels the brand, right? And as a branding designer, we need to feel it. We can't really, I don't think we can really describe it into words what the brand is. It's more about trying to get all of these words to get the feeling for it, and then designing out of a feeling, and then bringing reason to it. So it's a little bit complex, but I think in general, yes, there is a lot of amazing technology out there, but a designer who is a creative designer, not just a designer who let's say replicates things, or
Very generic.
doing hands-on work, will be replaced, I think, in the future. So like video editing or
Retouching
anything.
some of the
Yeah,
styling work.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure, for sure. Exactly. And retouching and like expanding images. We have already Photoshop AI that does that. Content aware fill kind of expands the image, recognizing the content of it. It's
Mm,
crazy. It's
yeah.
crazy. But yeah, I think we just have to keep on learning. That's the challenge that we have as a designer.
Yeah, and I'm also gathering that I think you're trying to say that the human touch part of design will always not be able to replicate it or automate it in a way of only human can do, unless one day there's AI have conscious, then maybe they will be able to do that. But that's like another story, another thing we'll have to be afraid of in the future. But I think as long as we involve ourselves and then keep updated about what is happening and what are the new tools are coming out, then kind of enhance on our skills on all these, like Adobe, obviously industry leaders, what are they new tools they're rolling out. We just kind of have to live on the edge of the technologies and design constantly in order to keep up with the industry. So that's really cool. And then just, always fascinated about the whole future. And I think we're living in such age of things are just changing so fast and new technologies just coming out so fast. It's probably like the fastest ever in the human in this human what do you like the human histories.
Mhm.
So it's kind of scary, but it's also very exciting, because I don't know in our lifetime what are probably some of the wildest thing will came out and technology will came out will ever be able to imagine right now. But anyways, I feel like I'm all off the topic a little bit, but it was just good to talk about things like this.
Yeah, I
um,
love it.
yeah. So I think that's all the questions we have. But I think you're such a great educator and a designer. And you worked with so many other like very talented people with Adobe. Do you have some of the tips or recommendation to share if some solopreneurs who are not have a huge budget yet to hire a branding designer like yourself who are super experienced? What are the things they can do to get not super generic branding, but yet somewhat polished, just suitable for the brand they are now, so they can just get started, as because a lot of time there's a lot of challenges facing as you who are solopreneur, as we're who solopreneurs, and it's hard to everybody wants to be perfect, especially female. I know I identify with that. I want to be perfect in order to launch a brand, so everything has to be perfect. But truth be told, the reality is that you just have to launch whatever you have, use the resources you have in hand. That might means that you can hire a designer as for now, but what are the some of the resources or platforms they can utilize? Obviously your course is like such a good one because it's from start to finish. So beyond that, is there any tools you suggest to people who can use to just kind of DIY some stuff on their own to kind of get the brand going, and maybe later on they can hire a professional?
Mhm. Yeah, so I think the first thing I would just go through the process similar to how I do it, in a maybe a more simplified version. So I would definitely try to understand the target audience first. So who is your customer? Let's say you have a product, you try to understand who is this person who is going to buy this product, or who is this person who is going to be intrigued to buy this product or interested in it. So identify that person, identify what other brands are they looking into, what other brands are they intrigued by, and why. Try to understand what exactly is intriguing to them. So let's say we have like a woman like yourself, Claire, or like me, who are intrigued by branding that looks very different. For example, if you look at Kin Euphorics, they have an amazing branding that's completely different from what we see, right? And we get intrigued by the uniqueness of it. So if you see that your target audience is getting intrigued by something that's unique and different from everybody else, then try that approach and try to put together a color palette, find a typography that's very unique and intriguing to your target audience. Try to combine those things. Use the color palette, use the typography, and maybe you can design your logo when you when you watch this course. I'm sure you will have a lot of kind of good basics on designing a logo. And so use that typography that you found that will be intriguing to your target audience, and use that for the logo for now. And you don't have to go into the vector for now. You can just type out the name of your brand and export it, and just place it everywhere, make it look consistent across social media platforms or on your website. I think the beginning is all about finding out that and being consistent about it. So having a color palette, having typography, having a logo that will intrigue your target audience, and then your brand can grow with time. So you can either add or subtract any of the colors in your color palette if you think that maybe it's too boring, maybe it's too crazy, maybe it's too colorful. You can still change that color palette, but with time, your brand will evolve and perfection itself. So that's kind of the route I would go.
Yeah, I love that you give us basically the permission, be like, hey, if it's not perfect at first, it's okay. Your brand will evolve and you will eventually find your good sweet spot. And maybe later on you evolve again, you have to change again. So it doesn't have to be a set stone color palettes or fonts or anything. Everything could be changing later on. So that just makes me feel like, oh, huge pressure off my shoulder. I don't have to be super perfect as I launch a brand or anything at all. But yeah, that's a great process to kind of start if you want to DIY your branding. What are like some of the platform or accounts or things besides obviously Instagram, Pinterest to look for inspirations for you?
So I think it totally depends on the industry that you're in, having your own business. Let's say you're selling something that's sold in a supermarket or in, let's say, a Target. Then I would imagine the shelf that your product will be standing on. I would go into the store and I would look at the other products and imagine your product there and think about what's necessary for this product to stand out and to catch the eye of your client. So that's one way that I really love. I also love just taking photos. Let's say I'm designing for, let's say, any kind of like a spirit or alcohol. I go to the store where that product is being sold. I look at other products. I get inspiration. I constantly kind of add to my collection of designs that I've seen so far. And that helps also to have a different image than, or a different vision in your head than people who are constantly on Pinterest. Because on Pinterest, you'll find different other solutions. What I also like to do is, let's say I'm designing for the cosmetics industry. I will look into a completely different industry for inspiration. So instead of looking at other cosmetics, I would look maybe at any wellness brand or anything that's maybe like a beverage, or anything maybe like a beverage that's being consumed by your target audience. I would look into that, or any kind of products that are being consumed by your target audience can be really helpful to understand what are they surrounded with, without actually looking at the specific product. But what other things do they have, not in the bathroom, but maybe in the living room? So that's kind of what I like doing, just get inspiration from a different industry.
Yeah, I love that you, throughout our conversation, you keep on mentioning the same thing, like the target audience, and that's basically what we're designing for. So it's a super smart with that in mind, even though if you may be designing a perfume, but what are the target audience of this perfume might share with the car they may have in this group of people, or
Exactly.
the decor. And then you search those brands and then see what they're doing and why the target audience are attracted to their brand. Therefore, you can gather some data and information or inspiration from the other brands who are targeting exactly same people. I think that's such a smart way to do that research and gather information. And it's very factual backed information, instead of you just like, oh, I think this is,
Yeah.
it's not a personal opinion anymore. It is actual data. So I love that. I love you are such strategic thinking visual designer, because I think that's very important. Like you mentioned from the really beginning, you design everything for a reason. So it's not like you're only designing because it looks nice. There's a reason behind it. So that is absolutely, the goal of all designers, I think, unless you're an artist and doing a painting or something, who are super
Yeah.
super out there.
Yeah,
Doesn't
that's
have
the
to solve a
difference.
problem.
Exactly. That's the difference between art and design, right? Art is something that's not necessarily functional, but expresses a specific feeling. But design needs to be functional, but also having a little bit of art in the design can be very inspiring for the consumer and very intriguing and interesting. So I think it's a very fine line, and I think there should be always just a little touch of art in the design that will help it stand out.
Totally. So before we wrap this up, what are the platforms you're currently at where our listeners can find you?
Yeah, so I would say just go and follow me on Instagram. It's at Julia Masalska, my first and my last name. And from there, you'll find all the other platforms. I have links in my bio, and I'm currently trying to keep up with all the events that I'm doing. So you will always be informed at what's going on in Julia's professional life
I
and where
love
I'm present. So we have a
that.
lot of really cool events coming up. So I'm always posting those into my stories and notifying my followers. So I think Instagram is the best platform.
Okay, yeah, because I always see you on stories posting Adobe free events and any other events you're involved. It's very, I think it's almost weekly. Do you do something every week?
Almost every week. It depends on the time. Sometimes I have waves of a lot of client work, and that's when I'm kind of a little bit off social media and more into client work and more deep diving into branding and packaging. But there are phases where I'm very much involved with Adobe, where I'm educating more. And I think having this balance of actually making the experience working with clients and then educating that to my audience, I think is really kind of the key to my work and the key to how I'm able to teach something because I've learned something myself, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of fun stuff coming out, and there will be also a podcast that I recently recorded with per our last email. That's going to be also really fun. It was a very long episode and very revealing. I'm telling a lot about my background and my kind of life story. So if you're interested, stay tuned on Instagram. I'll definitely notify you all.
Sorry, I also wanted to take a screenshot. You
Of
probably
course, let's
heard
do it.
me. I'm gonna take a screenshot. Perfect. Thank you. I love that. Perfect.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Julia. I really appreciate your time. And I know you're traveling. Are you going be back to
Denver.
yeah, Denver soon?
Yeah, I'm gonna be back on Monday coming week. So I'm just here for the weekend and also gonna visit my friend in Washington, and then I'm gonna be back. Just like a very short trip.
Oh, great. Are you almost is your leg almost back to 100%?
Yes, I'm actually starting running now. So that's
Oh,
really
nice.
exciting.
Yay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know it
yeah,
was
so
so
cool.
unfortunate. You had
A
the
lot of
injury, but I'm glad that you fully recovered almost.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Yeah, it's a lot of physical therapy and a lot of exercising, a lot of, trying to really stay active and stretching and all that stuff. So yeah, it's been a journey.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm so glad. Oh, thank you so much. I don't want to take too much of your time, but really glad we had this conversation, and we'll be saving this recording into our salon, and we'll be able to probably will be next week because we have to edit it some parts.
Mhm.
But for people who are not here today, then they will be able to see the replay.
Awesome. Cool. I'm excited. All right, Claire. Well, it was nice talking to you, and we'll stay in touch. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.